Some promises are written on paper. Some are written on the heart. But the strongest promises are the ones a man keeps even after the person he made it to is gone. My name is Meheran. I am 61 years old, and until 3 years ago, I believed blood was thicker than everything else in this world. I believed that the son I raised with my own hands would always stand by me. I was wrong. And the man who proved me wrong about my own son was not my son at all. He was the boy next door, the son of my husband's oldest friend. Let me take you back to where this story truly begins. 40 years ago, my husband, Rafiq, and his best friend, Salim, started a small textile business together in a rented shop with 2 sewing machines and a dream. They had nothing but trust. No big investors, no fancy contracts. Just a handshake and a promise. Whatever happens to one of us, the other will protect both families like his own. That business grew. It became a respected name in the local market. 2 families grew alongside it. My son, Farhan, and Salim's son, Adil, were born almost the same year. They played in the same courtyard, ate from the same plate, and grew up calling each other brothers. But here is something I did not understand back then. Growing up in the same house does not mean growing up with the same heart. Farhan was clever, charming, always looking for the shortcut. Adil was quiet, hard-working, the kind of boy who would rather lose a game fairly than win it by cheating. As children, this difference seemed small. As men, it would change everything. When Salim passed away suddenly from a heart condition, it broke our family in ways I still find hard to explain. Before he closed his eyes for the last time, Salim held his son's hand and made him promise one thing. Whatever happens, protect Rafiq's family. Protect the business we built together. Never let outsiders tear apart what brotherhood built. Adil was only 22 years old. He had just started working in the company. He had no idea how heavy that promise would become. None of us knew, at that moment, that one day it would not be outsiders threatening our family business. It would be my own son. I did not know it then, but the story of betrayal and revenge you are about to hear is not about hatred. It is about 2 young men who were given the same lesson in loyalty, and only one of them listened. Stay with me, because what happened next will make you question everything you believe about family and everything you believe about loyalty. After Salim's passing, Rafiq took over full responsibility of the business, and true to the old promise between the 2 friends, he treated Adil like his own son. He gave him a proper position in the company, taught him the trade, trusted him with the accounts, and slowly, Adil became the backbone of daily operations. Farhan, meanwhile, was sent abroad to study business management. We were proud. We told everyone in the neighborhood that our son would come back with a foreign degree and modernize the family business. We imagined a bright future. But something changed in Farhan during those years away. Maybe it was the distance. Maybe it was the new friends he made, people who valued fast money over patient effort. When he returned home 5 years later, he was polished, well-spoken, dressed in expensive clothes, and restless. He did not want to learn the business from the ground up. He wanted to run it his way, immediately. My husband tried to guide him gently. Son, this business was built slowly, with patience. Learn it first. Farhan would smile and nod, but in private, he complained to me. Ma, this is an old-fashioned business. Adil still runs it like it's 40 years ago. We are losing opportunities. I did not see the danger in those words then. I saw ambition. I did not realize ambition without patience can turn into something dangerous. Adil, on the other hand, never once asked for a bigger title, a bigger share, or public credit. When my husband began struggling with his own health a year later, it was Adil who quietly stepped in, checking on suppliers, managing staff salaries, even sitting with my husband late at night going through ledgers so nothing would collapse. I remember one evening I asked Adil directly, "Why do you work so hard for a business that is not even yours?" He looked at me and said something I will never forget. "Auntie, my father made a promise on his last day. That promise is the only inheritance he left me. I would rather lose money than lose my father's word." Those words should have made me proud of both boys equally. Instead, without realizing it, they planted the first seed of jealousy in Farhan's heart. Because deep down, Farhan knew that everyone in that company, every worker, every supplier, even his own father, trusted Adil's word more than they trusted his ambition. And jealousy, when left alone in a proud heart, does not stay quiet for long. It waits. It grows. And eventually, it finds a way to strike. What Farhan did next would not just hurt a business. It would nearly destroy an entire family's name. 2 years after Farhan returned home, my husband suffered a major health scare. His heart, weakened by years of stress, forced doctors to demand complete rest. Suddenly, the responsibility of running the company could not wait any longer. A decision had to be made. Who would lead? By rights and by capability, everyone expected Adil to take a bigger role, perhaps as general manager, while Farhan would learn under him. But Farhan could not accept this. To him, this was not about skill. It was about pride. "I am the owner's son," he told me one night, his voice sharp. "I will not report to an employee, no matter how loyal he pretends to be." That word, pretends, should have warned me. But a mother's heart finds reasons to defend her child, even when her instincts whisper otherwise. To keep peace, my husband made Farhan co-director alongside Adil, hoping the two would balance each other, one with formal education, one with practical loyalty and experience. For a few months, it seemed to work. They divided tasks. Farhan handled marketing and new client meetings. Adil handled production, staff, and finances. But slowly, small problems began appearing. Invoices did not match. Certain expensive export orders were being approved without proper checking. A supplier we had trusted for 15 years suddenly stopped answering calls. When Adil raised concerns in meetings, Farhan brushed him off in front of the staff. "You worry too much about small numbers. Think bigger, Adil. This is called growth." What none of us knew was that Farhan had begun secret meetings with a new business associate, a smooth-talking man named Kabir, who convinced Farhan that the old-fashioned family business was holding him back. Kabir proposed something dangerous: quietly transfer major clients and contracts to a brand-new company, one that Farhan alone would own, cutting out both his father and Adil completely. Farhan was told it would look like normal business expansion. In reality, it was the slow, silent draining of everything two families had spent 40 years building. I noticed Farhan smiling more at home during this time, humming songs, buying gifts for his wife and children. I thought my son had finally found peace with his role in the company. I did not know that peace was actually the calm of a man who believed he was about to win something enormous, at the cost of everyone who trusted him. The betrayal was already in motion, and the man who would first discover it was not his father. It was the one person Farhan had underestimated his entire life, Adil. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Adil stayed late at the office to reconcile the monthly accounts, something he had done faithfully for years without complaint. That night, he noticed a pattern that made his hands go cold. 3 of our biggest clients, accounts that brought in nearly half the company's yearly income, had quietly shifted their contracts to a new company called Farhan Textile Solutions. At first, Adil assumed it was some kind of clerical mistake. He pulled the registration documents. His stomach sank when he saw the name listed as sole director and owner, Farhan. He did not react immediately. Adil was not a man who ran to accuse someone in anger. He remembered his father's dying words: "Protect this family, protect what was built." So instead of confronting Farhan directly, he did something wiser. He quietly gathered every document, every signed contract, every bank transfer, building an undeniable trail of evidence, just in case things turned worse. They did turn worse. 2 weeks later, Farhan walked into his father's room and, without warning, announced that he was stepping away to focus on his own growing company, and that Adil could handle the old business however he liked. My husband, still recovering, felt his heart break in that moment more than any illness ever could. "Everything I built, you were just walking away with our biggest clients?" he asked, his voice trembling. Farhan, cold and confident, replied, "Baba, this is business. Nothing personal. You should be proud I finally built something of my own instead of hiding behind Adil's shadow." That sentence still echoes in my ears today. "Nothing personal," he said, about the family that raised him, fed him, trusted him with everything. When my husband confronted him with the documents Adil had prepared, showing exactly how Farhan secretly redirected clients and misused his position, Farhan did not apologize. He justified it. He blamed the outdated system, blamed Adil for not adapting, blamed us for never believing in his vision. That night, I sat alone in my room and cried in a way I had never cried before. Not because my son left the business, but because he showed me, without shame, that he was capable of betraying the very people who loved him most. Adil came to see us the next morning, not with anger, but with quiet steadiness. He placed a folder of documents on the table and said softly, "Uncle Ani, I did not do this to hurt Farhan. I did this because my father made me promise to protect this family. I intend to keep that promise, even now." In that single moment, I finally understood the difference between the two boys I had watched grow up together. One broke a promise for personal gain. The other kept a promise even when it meant standing against his own childhood brother. But this was only the beginning. Because what Farhan did next would push this family into a battle none of us ever expected. Word travels fast in a small business community, and within weeks, everyone knew that Farhan had started his own company using contacts and trust built by his father's decades-old business. Some people admired his boldness. Others quietly whispered that he had crossed a line no son should cross. Farhan, instead of feeling guilt, decided to go on the offensive. He began telling suppliers and old family friends a different story, that Adil had manipulated the finances for years, that Adil was the real reason the company had stopped growing, and that Farhan was simply escaping mismanagement. This hurt Adil deeply, not because his reputation was at stake, but because he had spent 7 years protecting a family that was now being turned against him by the very son he tried to shield. For the first time since his father's passing, Adil felt truly alone. He came to me one evening, sitting quietly on the same courtyard steps where he and Farhan once played as children. "Auntie," he said, "I never wanted to fight. I only wanted to keep my father's word. But now it feels like keeping that promise is destroying me." I held his hand, the same way I once held Farhan's as a baby, and told him something I believed with my whole heart. A promise kept with honesty may cost you today, but a promise broken for greed will cost him everything, eventually. "Patience, my son. Truth always finds its way to daylight." My husband, weak in health but strong in spirit, made a decision that surprised everyone. He called a formal meeting with the remaining company shareholders, old family friends who had invested small amounts in the business over the decades, and, in front of everyone, handed over full operational control to Adil, not as a favor, but because the numbers, the loyalty, and the truth all pointed in one direction. Farhan was furious. He accused his father of choosing an outsider over his own blood. But my husband said something that silenced the entire room. "Blood gave you a place in this family. Character earns a place in this business. You lost yours the day you decided a signature meant more than a promise." That day marked a clear line between the two young men. Adil, quiet and steady, stayed and worked twice as hard to rebuild what had been damaged. Farhan, angry and embarrassed, threw himself fully into his new company, determined to prove everyone wrong, determined to make his father regret his decision. Little did Farhan know, the storm he was about to create with his own hands would become the very thing that exposed him completely. Farhan's new company started strong. With borrowed trust and stolen contacts, he secured several big export orders. He hired staff quickly, spent lavishly on office space and advertising, and told everyone who would listen that he had finally proven himself without his father's help. But building something on stolen trust is like building a house on sand. It may stand tall for a season, but the first real storm will reveal the cracks. Farhan, eager to impress his new investors, especially Kabir, the man who had convinced him to break away, began overpromising delivery timelines to clients he barely understood. He cut corners on quality checks to save costs. He borrowed heavily from banks, using his father's old company name as informal credibility, even though he had no legal right to do so anymore. Within 8 months, 2 of his biggest new clients received defective shipments. Both clients were international buyers with strict quality standards. They did not just cancel the contracts. They publicly warned other buyers in the industry not to trust Farhan Textile Solutions. Kabir, seeing the company losing money and reputation quickly, did what such men always do. He disappeared, taking with him a significant portion of Farhan's remaining investment funds, citing restructuring the partnership, which was simply a polite way of walking away with what he could still take. Farhan, once confident and proud, was now drowning in unpaid loans, damaged reputation, and no one left to blame but himself. Meanwhile, back at the family business, Adil was doing something remarkable. Instead of celebrating Farhan's failure, he quietly reached out to the original clients who had left with Farhan, apologizing on behalf of the family name, personally guaranteeing quality and honesty, and slowly winning back their trust one relationship at a time. Within a year, the original company was not just recovering, it was thriving again, stronger than before, because clients realized that whatever else had happened, Adil's word had never once been broken. The contrast was now impossible to ignore. One young man built success on stolen trust and watched it crumble. The other rebuilt trust with patience and watched it multiply. But the story does not end with Farhan simply failing. Because failure alone does not always bring humility. Sometimes it brings desperation. And desperate men do desperate things. With his company collapsing under unpaid debts, Farhan grew desperate. Creditors were demanding payment. His new office had to be shut down. His expensive lifestyle, built on borrowed confidence, was falling apart piece by piece. In his desperation, Farhan made one final, devastating decision. He approached the same suppliers who had recently returned to trust Adil and the family business, and he tried something unthinkable. He forged old signed agreements, claiming that certain older contracts still legally belonged partly to him, hoping to redirect payments meant for the family company into his own struggling accounts one last time. It was a gamble born out of panic, not strategy, and it was clumsy enough that one alert supplier noticed the mismatched signatures and quietly informed Adil before processing anything. This time, Adil did not stay silent out of loyalty alone. He understood that if this went unchecked, it would not just hurt the business. It could destroy my husband's remaining health and possibly lead to serious legal consequences for Farhan himself. Adil came to our house that evening with the forged documents in hand. He did not shout. He did not gloat. He simply placed them in front of my husband and said, "Uncle, I kept my promise to protect this family. Now I need you to help me protect Farhan from himself, before this becomes something none of us can undo." My husband, heartbroken all over again, called Farhan home for a final conversation, not as a business partner, but as a father speaking to a son standing at the edge of ruin. For the first time in years, Farhan did not argue back with pride. When the forged documents were laid before him, when he saw that Adil had every opportunity to expose him publicly and legally destroy his reputation, but chose instead to bring it quietly to the family first, something inside Farhan finally broke, not out of anger this time, but shame. He sat in silence for a long time. Then, in a voice we had not heard from him in years, small and shaking, he said, "I don't know when I became someone who could do this to his own family." It was the first honest sentence he had spoken in over a year. What happened next would determine whether this story ended in complete destruction, or in something none of us expected, redemption. My husband, though hurt beyond words, made a choice that surprised even me. Instead of handing Farhan over to legal authorities, which would have destroyed his future completely, he asked for one final family meeting, with Adil present, to decide the path forward together. At that meeting, Adil spoke first, and his words carried no bitterness. "Farhan, we grew up as brothers. I never wanted to compete with you, and I never wanted to see you fall this low. My father's promise was never about defeating you. It was about protecting this family, and you are still part of this family, whether you remember that or not." Farhan, tears in his eyes for the first time in front of us, admitted everything. The secret meetings with Kabir, the redirected contracts, the forged documents, the pride that made him see loyalty as weakness instead of strength. "I thought proving myself meant proving I didn't need any of you," Farhan said quietly. "I was wrong. I needed all of you. I just didn't want to admit it." My husband made the final decision. Farhan's failed company debts would be settled quietly using personal savings, avoiding public scandal and legal trouble, but on one condition. Farhan would return to the original family business, not as director or owner, but starting from the very bottom, learning the business honestly, under Adil's guidance, exactly the way he had refused to do years earlier. It was a humbling condition, but Farhan, broken and humbled by his own choices, accepted it without argument. For the community watching from outside, this was not the loud, dramatic downfall people expected. There was no public shaming, no courtroom battle, no headline scandal. The real victory was quieter, but far more powerful. A family choosing truth and patience over pride and revenge, allowing a broken man the chance to rebuild himself, guided by the very person he once tried to push aside. Adil never once made Farhan feel small during this process. Where Farhan had once mocked Adil's loyalty as old-fashioned, Adil now taught Farhan the very foundation his own father had built the business on: patience, honesty, and respect for every single person who contributes to a shared dream. Slowly, month by month, Farhan began to change, not because he was forced to, but because for the first time, he was learning what real strength looked like. 2 years have passed since that difficult family meeting. The business today stands stronger than it ever did before, guided by Adil's steady leadership and, surprisingly, supported by a humbled, changed Farhan, who now works transparently, respectfully, and honestly beside the man he once tried to overshadow. Farhan often tells new employees a story now, one he never imagined he would tell. He tells them about a promise his father's old business partner made on his deathbed, and how his own best friend's son kept that promise even when it meant standing against Farhan himself. He tells them that the greatest lesson of his life was not learned in any foreign business school, but from watching quiet, consistent loyalty outlast loud, temporary ambition. As for Adil, he never once demanded recognition, apology, or higher position for what he did. When people ask him why he stayed loyal even when Farhan turned against him, he simply says, "My father did not leave me money or property. He left me his word. Keeping it was never a burden. It was the only inheritance worth protecting. And I, as a mother, learned something I will carry for the rest of my life. I once believed that blood alone guarantees loyalty, that raising a child with love automatically means they will honor that love in return. I have learned that loyalty is not inherited. It is chosen every single day through small, honest actions, especially when no one is watching. My son broke his own promise chasing quick success and personal pride. Another mother's son kept a promise made on his father's deathbed, expecting nothing in return except the peace of doing what was right. If there is one lesson I hope you take from this story, it is this: character is not proven when everything is easy. Character is proven in the moment you are tempted to break a promise for personal gain and choose, instead, to keep it, even when it costs you comfort, recognition, or immediate reward. Promises are not just words. They are the truest reflection of who we really are when no one is forcing us to keep them. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the promises in your own life, the ones you have kept, and perhaps the ones you have broken, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, the real revenge against betrayal is never anger or destruction. The real revenge is simply becoming someone whose word can always be trusted. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories of betrayal, loyalty, and redemption.